All right, good afternoon and happy Thanksgiving Eve, everyone. Would like to call the special meeting of the Reinvestment Workforce Committee to order. I'll start by doing roll call for committee members. Myself present, Andrea Hawkins, Elvin Medina,
Present.
Gregory Davis,
Present.
Avery Gaddis, Charles Venator Santiago,
Present.
and Kelly Valeries. All right. So I believe we have quorum. I will move on to
You forgot Madam Chair, Mike Jefferson.
Mike Jefferson. I'm so sorry. You are not listed on the agenda I'm looking at, but yes, Mike Jefferson is here as well.
Well, we'll update that. Sorry about that, Madam Chair.
No worries. All right, and I see many of our staff members have joined as well, so thank you all for being here. I'll move on to item B, approval of the August 8th, 2025 meeting minutes. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Second? Got a second. All right, any questions, discussions? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstentions? Awesome, thank you. All right, moving on to the fun stuff. So, item C on our agenda is sharing of the recommendation for grant managers for the R2 program. So, I'm going to let Executive Director McGee kind of walk us through the wonderful presentation he's put together, but I will preface it with saying, a really well-structured process for this year, and props to the entire team. I know Caesar's been working a lot on this. He has been our kind of point person on the council, and Marty's been helping a lot with just making sure we're, doing things the right way, following all the guidelines. So really appreciate the staff, leaning in, being patient with us. There were a lot of applications to get through over a very busy period of time. So appreciate the patience. It was myself, Chairwoman Comer, and Caesar on the evaluation committee that kind of went through each application for each region, scored them, followed a pretty well-structured scorecard, discussed them, and then brought our final recommendations forward, which you will be seeing today. So again, thank you again to everyone that helped make this happen. I'm just very impressed by how, transparent, how clear, how well structured the entire process has been so far. And with that, I will hand it over to Director McGee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and also thank you to the entire council for making yourselves available within the last 48 hours and calling this meeting the week of Thanksgiving. So again, thank you for your commitment. Again, good afternoon to everyone who might view this video at a later date. Thank you for joining us as we continue the work of strengthening the Social Equity Council's commitment to, as already stated, transparency, accountability, and community-centered investment. As the Madam Chair have already mentioned, over the last several months, our team, in partnership with the Council, has been deeply engaged in evaluating the R2 program, Reimagine, Revitalize, Reinvestment Program, which is a core pillar of our 2025-2028 strategic plan. This plan, as we all know, it charges us with one simple but urgent responsibility, and that is to ensure that the adult use cannabis revenues are reinvested directly into the communities most harmed by the war on drugs, responsibly, equitably, and with measurable impact. So my team will not long, but we'll discuss the overall request for proposal, criteria for selection of grant managers, and of course, and I underscore, opportunities for community-based organizations, and the overall evaluation process. However, I wouldn't be Brandon McGee if I didn't provide you with at least a high-level overview of the steps the council has taken to realign this program, strengthen public trust, and ensure the highest level of transparency in how these dollars are or will be deployed. As you all know, in accordance with statute, the council issued the R2 grant manager request for a proposal back in June 25th of this year, opening a competitive process to identify qualified partners across the state's targeted regions. Our process was designed to promote fairness, reduce bias, and hold applicants to a consistent standard. Okay. The RFP was widely publicized across council communication channels, municipal partners, stakeholder networks, specifically the Black and Puerto Rican Legislative Caucus, and through targeted social media campaigns to ensure equitable access to information. The evaluation committee used a standardized, highly structured rubric assessing multiple areas of which my team will provide details. Committee members with any real or perceived conflicts were recused, ensuring integrity throughout the review process. And members independently, and that's members of the evaluation committee, scored each proposal, then convened to analyze composite averages and discuss scoring rationale before recommending final selections to myself. After reviewing the full evaluation, I am pleased to say I affirm the committee's recommendations with confidence and look forward to a deeper dive. Recognizing the need for deeper engagement, and this is important, particularly among smaller and emerging organizations, we, on behalf of the council, extended the RFP submission deadline to September 3rd of this year. This extension aligned with our strategic emphasis on equity and broadened the applicant pool, giving prospective grant managers, especially those who, are rooted in historically marginalized communities, we wanted to give them the time needed to prepare for these competitive proposals. So a core, and I have to remind you, a core value of the 3-year strategic plan is community partnership. And so over the course of the RFP and evaluation period, the council engaged targeted outreach. I'm not going to read all of the stakeholders, but a few in particular: municipal leaders, local government partners, community-based organizations, nonprofit networks in each target region, state agencies, advocacy groups, just to name a few. This outreach ensured that the R2 program's realignment remained responsive, grounded, and shaped by those closest to community needs. I'll end here. As the leader of this group of amazing people, I am extremely humbled and proud of the disciplined, transparent, and community-centered approach we have taken. The work of reinvestment is not merely transactional. It is transformational. And today's strengthened R2 program reflects our commitment to restoring trust, expanding opportunity, and ensuring every single reinvestment dollar delivers meaningful, measurable impact. At this time, I'd like to turn over a portion of this time to Madi and Caesar, and then we'll kick it back over to Madam Chair for questions. Madi?
Thank you. Just by way of a recap, right, I think Brandon covered a significant portion of what I'll say, so I'll be quick. As you know, we issued a request for proposals earlier this year intended to select grant managers for each of the 10 regions that we are targeting as part of the R2 community reinvestment. These 10 regions account for 194 of the 237 census tracts across the state. So the impact is significant and widespread. It'll be a $36 million investment over 3 years, and it's intended to impact 3 different priority areas, which were designated by the council: economic development, reentry initiatives, and youth initiatives. The selected grant managers, in addition to doing grant and contract management work, right, will assist the council in administering a notice of funding opportunity for community-based organizations. So these folks will compile their applications, conduct the evaluation of such applications in alignment with the criteria that we, the council, will be providing to them, and assist in the recommendations that will ultimately be made to the council for funding. To select these grant managers, the evaluation committee took into account a rubric which contained specific items such as grant manager experience, oversight and compliance controls to be implemented while conducting grant management services, their proposed budget, how they were going to distribute their 10%, which was the cap for their compensation, audited financial statements, what does their internal controls look like? Were there any findings? The staffing plan, meaning, how qualified are the individuals that they would have conducting the services, experience in managing high impact programs, including state and non-state funded programs, and the resources to carry out the contracts, right? The services to be provided to the council. And as Brandon mentioned, these grant managers will then be providing an opportunity for the CBOs, which is where the impact actually occurs. So they are expected to select approximately 18, that may vary depending on how they distribute the funding amounts, but basically 18 per region. And these CBOs are to be providing services in the priority areas that I previously mentioned. Again, these are 3-year awards intended to provide continuity and predictability for the CBOs, right? We don't do much of a service if we provide a grant for a 1-year program and then, they can't provide continuity to those services. And finally, as we've already mentioned, the GMs will provide oversight and compliance control to ensure proper use of funds and fiscal and programmatic reporting to the council. Now, pass it over to Cesar.
Thank you. So here are the selected grant managers, and I've just got a few bullet points to run through. Special note, a lot of this has been covered by Brandon and Madi, but I do want to reemphasize the points and the process. So we reviewed 23 eligible proposals across the 10 regions, and there were some instances where the same proposer submitted for more than one region. This happened on a few occasions, and that explains why there are repeats. We reviewed the proposals in accordance with the RFP process, which was shared with members of the evaluation committee. Individuals with a conflict of interest recluse themselves from the process. We reviewed proposals for each region according to a standard rubric that had weighted criteria. The evaluation committee met and discussed findings to gather a consensus on the proposers. Recommendations were discussed with the chief executive officer. Grant managers will contract with around 18 community-based organizations, and these contracts will range. Yes.
Sir, just so that our state, good old state, move that over. We don't want your computer to restart in the middle of your presentation. Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt. Yep.
No, I'm sorry. I did not see that.
It's okay.
But the grant managers will manage around 18 contracts with community-based organizations, and these will range from $25,000 to $100,000, and they will act in conjunction with the guidance and goals of the R2 program and the council. And now I will hand it back over to Brandon for the final slide.
I'll just add something if I may. I think that so while there were some proposers that submitted for more than one region or all 10 regions, there were also regions that only received one proposer as well. So that's why you see 23 eligible proposals and 6 unique grant entities.
Thank you, Madi, for the clarification.
So just for efficiency, we can definitely obviously answer any questions, but just by way of calendar information and updates, today's meeting actually replaced the meeting that we had scheduled on December 17th. So we've since canceled that meeting. So you all have, happy holiday, all that good stuff. But we do have several other committee meetings that we wanted to provide just an update on. But as you all know, we have our regular council meeting on Tuesday, of which we will present these recommendations to the larger council or board. And then on Wednesday, December 17th, we have our report out meeting of the working group, which will be held at the Legislative Office Building. So let's go back to the previous slide, and I will turn it over to Madam Chairwoman to entertain any questions, comments, commentary, etc. Madam Chair.
So council members or committee members, any questions on the process, the selected grant managers, etc.?
I have a question. This
Sure,
is
Councilman
Councilmember
Jefferson.
Jefferson. Yeah, have we, you haven't announced the names of the grant managers?
Sorry, we made the assumption that all members could see it on the screen, but I know you're driving, so we'll go ahead and just read them off. So for Bridgeport, and this is alphabetical order, we have the selected grant manager is the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven. Danbury, United Way of Coastal and Western Connecticut. Hartford, East Hartford Region, United Way, Inc., Hartford. Meriden, we have Community Foundation for Greater New Haven. That's Meriden. New Britain, we have the Community Foundation of Greater New Britain. For New Haven, East Haven, West Haven Region, United Way of New Haven. New London, Norwich, and Wyndham Region, that's the United Way of Southeastern Connecticut. Norwalk Region, United Way of Coastal and Western Connecticut. Stamford, United Way of Coastal and Western Connecticut. Norwalk, United Way of Coastal and Western Connecticut. And lastly, Waterbury Region, United Way of Greater Waterbury.
Thank you.
Yes.
Can I ask a
Councilmember
question?
Hunter. Yes, please.
Yeah, and I'm sorry this is after the fact, but this is great work, by the way. One of the things that I'm seeing here is that a lot of organizations lack the capacity to manage grants. Is there a way that we can talk about doing some capacity building for organizations that are going to be maybe subcontracted or working here, like some sort of workshop or some sort of training that could lead some of these other organizations to become grant managers in 3 years or 2 years? This might be a big ask, but it sounds to me like it's an important ask.
Yeah, I think, and maybe we can share just a kind of rubric. I will say because of the size and scope of the grants that we're distributing, we obviously wanted and we're preferring those candidates that had both the experience, the capacity, and proven track record, right? Like we want to make sure if we're giving this to someone to disperse, like that's a goal. Personally, I mean, I think from a reinvestment perspective, our job is to make sure this money is getting into the right hands. And I feel like less so making sure we're building capacity of organizations to be grant managers, but that's my personal take on it. But Director Mediana, you're jumping in.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with your assessment, Madam Chair. I would just add that we are in the process, and we've discussed this internally, at what point do we offer, I want to say classes, but that's not the correct word, but opportunities of engagement to help prepare many of these organizations so that they're prepared to respond and apply to some of these opportunities, i.e., grant management situations. So it's not far-fetched, Dr. Venator. It's not. It's something that we definitely have considered. But for the sake of the conversation, I think a lot of these organizations will have that opportunity to apply via the grant notice that we will work alongside with the grant managers in the first quarter of next year to offer these folks. But I agree. I mean, that was my initial gut reaction. Like, how do we get, smaller organizations from these communities to apply to these types of funding opportunities? But we don't want to be naive. There are a lot of these organizations who are doing excellent work, perhaps not they are absent of the infrastructure to then disperse such a large amount of money to multiple entities for all kinds of reasons. But
So let me ask you a follow-up. And again, this is not a criticism or anything. It's like it just evokes a question for me that because I'm seeing this at a national level, big organizations and that they have the capacity to do this work, and we're not seeing that many smaller organizations. But I know UConn used to have a certificate, a grant manager budget certification process.
Yep.
I don't know if they still have it. I saw it 10 years ago, but would it be possible for, I don't know, to identify some sort of certification, grant management certification program, either through UConn or another university or another, and talk about some sort of funding for organizations to go through that certification process so that in the next round they might be able to be, I don't know, competitive. It might not be the right way, but
I have one even better for you. During this process, or throughout this process, the selected community-based organizations, not selected,
yeah,
they're
sure.
approved, because they have to go through an application process. We will be partnering with an entity who will work alongside many of these CBOs and take them through a cohorted approach, budgeting, infrastructure, grant writing, et cetera. Our hope is that by going through that process, they are then better prepared to respond to a future grant management opportunity. That is our goal.
Yeah.
In addition to that, we at the Social Equity Council, we have been meeting with many of our philanthropic partners to do just that. Figure out how can we strengthen our community-based organizations who are closest to the challenges that we're trying to overcome, be a part of the financial benefits in helping to run their organizations, and also the reporting, right? And I have to mention this, and I'll say this out loud, like we work in government. That's number one. Number two, all you have to do is Google from whence we've come. And we are making sure that we are, laser focused on honing in on our process, but also strengthening, organizations so that they're better prepared to respond to these opportunities. So it's a great observation, Counselor. We need a little bit more time.
No. What I'm thinking is that there are these certification programs that are available, and I'm wondering whether it might make sense to propose. Let's say that you take a little bit of budget and you identify, I don't know, 10 people that can go through these certifications. So you have an official because it's not going to just help the participants and the SEC, but it could also help them apply for other grants available in the States.
Maybe we can table this for our next reinvestment committee meeting. I'm struggling with this a little bit because again, our goal is investing and building the capacity of the organizations that are providing the direct sort of services versus building up grant managers. I'm struggling with it a little bit, but I do want to make sure we're creating kind of space to talk about it. So we can maybe at a future meeting dive into it, and maybe Councilmember Venator, I can, you and I can connect after the holiday and just kind of understand a little bit more.
Sounds good.
Any other questions for Director McGee and the team?
Madam Chair, I have just one other matter I'd like to And I do, and thank you for getting us back on track. I thought we were going off track a bit. And I do appreciate the executive director's energy and passion. Here's where my confidence wanes. I have no doubt that the grant managers selected have the ability to distribute the funds from the SEC. My concern is that these community-based organizations, the non-traditional community-based organization who often get overlooked by these major grant managers, even some that you've already that were selected, are in fact overlooked. And the money that we deem transformational, which I kind of question, if we were talking about 36 billion or, even, 200 million, maybe we're talking transformation, but 36 million over 3 years, that's 12 million a year. And a lot of the organizations who do great work, these smaller community-based organizations, how do we ensure that someone who is doing some great things, an organization that's doing some great things in New Hallville, for example, in New Haven, maybe even teaching kids how to play chess, maybe even teaching young people important reading skills. How do we ensure that they are not overlooked by these major grant managers who really already have a list of organizations that they do business with? And part two is that, once you fund them, and because this is, we're trying to build in some continuity, these same folks are going to get money over and over and over again for 3 straight years. And these smaller organizations who are doing great work, these 501c2, are just left out in the cold because they're not part of that traditional framework. That's what I'm concerned about. So I need someone to help me understand how we monitor that.
I appreciate
and how
that.
we create guardrails for that.
I appreciate that. And I know in our application process, we've had in the kind of RFP that we put out, we have a lot of structure around what does outreach look like, what are the metrics we're tracking, but most importantly, what are the things that we want to see happening with this money, right? And we had extensive conversations over the last year or two, and probably dating before then too, to say, are we trying to do some of those smaller grants and funding for the basketball camp or for the chess team or sessions or whatever it is, or are we looking at larger scale, bigger dollars, transformational impact? And that is where we landed. That is what was in the RFP. So I will maybe be bold enough to say that I don't think that's our target audience. I think some of the smaller initiatives that you're talking about are not in the scope of this. I could be wrong. Director McGee, I'll let you kind of speak to it a little bit too. But
Yeah.
that is not what we discussed, agreed upon, and put out in the RFP. So you're not wrong that it probably won't reach them, but I don't think that's the intent here.
Yeah, and I will say this. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Council Jefferson, for your initial and gut reaction. I don't disagree with you. Where I disagree slightly on your assessment on how these funds are being reinvested. Those same organizations that you reference, whose mission is to provide, mentorship or chess opportunities or whatever, those same community-based organizations who call New Haven home and provide support to young people, for example, will have an opportunity to respond to a notice of funding opportunity. Of the 3 program priority areas, one of which focuses on youth initiatives. And it's not overly prescriptive. It is a request for them to come up with a proposal as to how they will support that priority area. So I would say give it a little time. It is a slightly different approach distribution wise than we have taken in the past. The other piece is, let's not forget, there are a couple other investment opportunities that are being made, and then I'll turn it over to Madi. But we have our social equity plans where businesses, dispensaries who call, for example, New Haven Home, have committed their in-kind donations, financial donations to many of those CBOs who call a DIA home. Those are investments. The other piece is the 3% tax benefit that many of our municipalities, they benefit a great deal, right? There's a list of recommended, expenditures, if you would, or opportunities for folks to spend money that municipalities are provided with. So there's a lot happening at once. But to Madam Chair, to her point, we want to really hone in on larger and more intense investments in many of these DIAs. And the grant managers who will work alongside the Social Equity Council will help to identify many of these CBOs who sometimes are just mission driven and overlooked. We want to avoid that. But we also want to make sure we put in a process that allows us to identify organizations who have the capacity to do the work, to report, but most importantly, help transform these communities. Madi?
Thank you. I think you and Madam Chair covered what my response would have been, right? We do have an established amounts and criteria. And as Madam Chair mentioned, the minimum grant request would be $25,000. So again, I'm not sure some of the CBOs would have adequate justification to request that amount. I think that if they do, then obviously we welcome them. In terms of how the grant managers will be selecting the CBOs, we, the SEC, will be guiding that rubric and criteria for selection. So it's going to be a uniform selection process throughout the 10 regions. The grant managers will not be designing their own funding opportunity with their own criteria, right? It's going to be guided and pretty much designed in its entirety by the SEC staff to be basically replicated by the grant managers. I think council.
May I? Yeah, thank you. But let's be clear. You guys make it sound like $25,000 is a lot of money, and it's not 25 million you're talking about. There are people who I mean, what type of organizations are we talking about? These community-based organizations can't handle $25,000. You make it sound like those are, I'm going to be very careful in how I respond to that, because it's kind of insulting to me. I mean, who are we talking about? Exactly, Madam Chair. You say those are not the organizations we're looking for. What organizations are you looking for that can't handle $25,000?
Councilman Jefferson,
We're
I'm
not
just
talking
responding
about
to
25.
if I may,
you're not talking about. Hold on, may I finish? You called it transformation. 25 million that's different. You're talking 25,000. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna wait and see just who's selected, and then I want to look at the outcome measurements, and then combine all that with all these other parameters that were raised by the executive director, because I am at this point totally insulted by your response to my concerns. So I'm going to leave it like that.
I will say this, just looking back at 2023, there were grants totaling $1,000. Talk about insulting, like that's crazy, right? And so with the limited amount of revenue we have that supports not only programs, personnel, operations, and I can continue, we have to be, on behalf of the council, a bit more strategic, calculated, and this is no disrespect to any organization. Oh, by the way, investigations that have been happening and mismanagement of funds. And so we have to figure out as a state agency how best to not only preserve these dollars, but also support organizations who are saying we need help and we realize we need more than $25,000 or hell, $1 million. We're trying to say, give us an opportunity to invest these dollars over the next 3 years, and it's not $25,000 for for 3 years. We're talking we're talking 3 years of $25,000. And it may not seem a lot to you, Michael, but it may be a lot to the local mentoring group that's applying for this money and need that money to survive in a world in which dollars are being
that's the
taken.
group. I raised that. And Madam Chair, I said that there might be someone who's teaching folks how to read. It might cost a little more than 25,000. It's like, well, we're not focused on those groups. Just what groups do you think I was talking about?
But I think
If someone is teaching someone how to read, which is a very difficult challenge, I might add.
Let me just clarify, though.
More than
Let me clarify.
For you,
let me clarify. Hold.
Please.
Let me just clarify. We're talking about grant managers, first of all, not community-based organizations.
I wasn't talking about the grant managers. I'm fine with them. My concern was who the grant managers were looking at, who they plan to distribute. And I raised the issue of certain community-based organizations who are non-traditional organizations, but who do great work in our community. And I was concerned that they would be overlooked. And Madam Chair suggested that I was off base somehow because those are not the organizations we're looking for, yet we're only talking about at minimum giving $25,000. If someone's teaching kids how to read or running an established mentoring program, I don't see how they should be locked out of this equation.
Thank you so much, Councilman
That's
Jefferson.
what she said.
And so let me reiterate what I shared. It was two-part. The first part was we have guidelines, we have criteria that will be followed, along with plans for how these organizations are going to be doing outreach into the community. And then I followed up with, you mentioned a chest in the park type thing. If those types of activities are much more smaller dollars, I still stand by, we are probably not going to entertain them.
I never said what dollars they were.
Councilman Jefferson, let me please finish. So to the point that Director McGee made earlier, we had in 2023 lots of grants going out for under $10,000, under $5,000, and we agree that that is not going to be our focus. So I will reiterate that. Well, I'm looking at this holistically, not just at New Haven.
Not in New Haven. New Haven had an average of $40,000. It was not in New Haven. I just want to make that clear.
So again, looking at this holistically, and I think Director McGee, you framed it correctly in terms of what our focus areas are, what the minimum threshold is. If there are organizations that are creating impact, that they're looking to scale things up, absolutely interested in them. And again, part of the onus is on all of us to make sure that when these grant managers put out their RFPs, we're making sure they're getting to the individual organizations that we think have the ability to bring value into the communities. And that's why this council exists, is to make sure that we're connecting those dots. So with that, I will move on to Councilman Medina. He's had his hand up for a bit.
Hey folks, want to thank everyone, including the staff, on what's been developed here. I mean, in light of the conversation right now, just for me, it's usually helpful to take a step back and get my head around what we're talking about. Right, there's a strategic plan that was developed about the SEC's approach to reinvestment, and at that point, a decision was made that the SEC would be focusing on statewide investments. Separate from my feelings about that then left the SEC with a determination of the distribution of funds are either centralized within the SEC or in partnership with community grant managers, which is kind of the direction that we've headed in. And in light of that, what I see in that list to me feels good. I read that as a system development for the SEC for the purposes of distribution. And I think what's being raised is fair in the point of it is still incumbent upon the SEC, and I understand it to be that is the intent, that we do not solely rely on those grant managers to be the local the experts on local community giving that should be done. Certainly their input is valued, and that their networks exist. I understand what the councilman is raising in terms of their networks may have a built-in bias that the SEC should be thoughtful about in the approach. So, in summary, I guess what I applaud the kind of approach based on the decisions that have been made about a distribution system. That makes sense to me. I would love for us just to keep an eye on administrative costs year over year, so that that's not, money that's being removed from community. and to hold those selected grant managers accountable to administrative costs that we may feel are not realistic or unfair. And also, my hope is that we do an analysis at the end of the first year on whether the statewide approach continues to be the right decision, or if we can have more impact and more targeted approaches. But that said, this is a lot of work that everyone's put into. This is, there's a lot of feelings involved in this as well, ensuring that this money goes to the right folks. And so I hear that, and understand this to be a vote at a distribution systems kind of development for the SCEC, which in light of some of the history in the past in some other regions has been a challenge. And I do appreciate the work that was put in here. So thank you all.
Thank you, Councilman Medina. I just appreciate all that feedback, and we'll definitely, make sure staff is keeping tabs on that. I do want to point out, I don't think we touched on this yet, but we did have requirements around how much of the total spend could be for administrative purposes. And if an organization was coming higher than what our guidelines stated, they were not qualifying as a grant manager. So we have exact numbers in terms of what the forecasted administrative spend is for all 3 years. And we definitely, took a deep look at that during our process. And Director McGee, correct me if I'm wrong, that number does not exceed 10% of the total. I just want to make sure that's right. Yep.
Correct.
Great.
Correct. And I will say, not to get into the weeds, but I think it's important here. It's been mentioned before. We also have built out a reporting system. So we've standardized throughout the entire state reporting, evaluation to ensure budgets are where they need to be. We're making quarterly payments to grant managers. It's not just a one-time, we give them a check, they go do what they want, and then they don't provide us with any information. So again, and we'll provide another overview for you all to just take another look at it. But I think it's critically important that we not abandon what we've gone through and what has happened, but at least avail yourselves to the new process, the improved process that will help to strengthen, our reinvestments statewide. Lastly, we wanted to ensure community-based organizations had an opportunity to respond by way of proposals to support the 3 program priority areas and not be overly prescriptive. To all of your point, every community in this state is slightly different, but the systemic challenges are, guess what, the same. And so as an organization, we've got to figure out how best financially and systems wise, how do we respond to that and also work alongside the people who are on the front line, community-based organizations doing the work, and be able to report out writ large, state of Connecticut, in a geopolitical climate where folks are trying to attack these types of investments. We have to have our reporting perfect to tell our story. And so I think aside from this, and I know the time is far spent and there's another council person wanting to ask a question, maybe we can have another conversation on some of the other concerns the council on this committee still has.
Thank you. Councilman Davis, your hand up.
Hello. Just had a quick question. I tend to agree with a lot of what Councilman Jefferson was saying, and obviously I'm newer to the council. With the new grant managers, will they be submitting, I guess, reporting to us? Like, are we approving and denying who gets the grants that they approve of? Or do they have a unilateral decision? Okay. All right. Thanks.
And again, I know it sounds almost too perfect from what you all have heard and experienced. We literally have a reporting process in place. We have staff who will review, analyze, push back where needed, but it's a system by which we're able to measure impact, success. And so once those CBOs have been, approved, et cetera, they then input their information into the system. The system then kicks it up to the grant manager. The grant manager then reviews it with the SEC, and we're working in tandem. We're not giving money away to a hired grant manager and saying, go be Mary and go figure it out. No, we're working lockstep with these folks throughout the entire 3 years so that we can adjust where appropriate and help support the community-based organization that's doing the yeoman's work, quite frankly, in our communities.
Thank you. Okay, that's okay. That definitely clarifies it. Thank you.
Additional questions? Okay, if no additional questions, and I apologize, I should have started the agenda item with this, but I was excited to dive into the presentation. I will entertain a motion to approve and move the recommended slate of grant managers to the full council for approval during the December 2nd meeting. So I believe that is being moved by Councilmember Venator.
Seconded.
Do I have a second? Seconded by Councilmember Medina. Any further discussion? Not all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I abstain.
Right. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 1. Thank you very much. All right, moving on. I'm not sure if we have additional reinvestment updates, Director McGee.
No, ma'am.
All right, if nothing else.
I'll just say this, I am available for any council members. I understand, let me put it that way. All of you are volunteers and we send a lot of information over to you all, but I guarantee you the questions that you might have and perhaps even, just trying to wrap your mind around all of this, there was communications sent to you on it. I say that to say I am and my staff, we are available to have these conversations, dive deeper, explain the why, the research that supports it. But we also want to remain committed to our communities throughout the state. So I am available. Call me anytime. But y'all have a happy Thanksgiving. And thank you all again for taking time to have this special meeting.
Thank you so much. With that, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Got seconded. All right. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Appreciate you all. And we'll see you on December 2nd.
Bye.
Happy Thanksgiving.